Hey everybody, hope you're doing really well, because today we're starting a series based on the KYBALION, which is a book that was suggested to me for reading and also for explaining, as I made a poll one day asking for a concept of the law of one that they wanted me to expand. Somebody suggested the 7 Hermetic principles, and here I am making this video. So for anybody who is familiar with the law of one, the raw material, this should be very easy to understand. In fact, to me, as I read the book, I was not surprised to find so many principles tied into the ways of the law of one, as Ra decides to call them, and that's something that I'm going to talk about here, which is the first thing I have. But this is going to be an introduction to the 7 Hermetic principles in general. I'm not going to go deep into them, as you'll see that they're going to be separate videos, each one of them explaining one of the 7 Hermetic principles. And I just wanted to give you a brief introduction as to what I'm about to do. And if you're coming here after studying the law of one with me, then you'll see that it's easier to understand everything here, because we're talking about the same thing. Remember, we're always talking about the same thing when we get into philosophy, religion, or spirituality, or belief systems, or psychology, or even physics. We're always talking about the same thing, because everything can be reduced actually to one thing, and that one thing is infinity, which in our mystic traditions we have just named God, because God is everything, and God is consciousness, and we can trace it back to that, and we're all tied to that. In fact, we all are that in different manifestations of it. So once again, this is going to be just a brief introduction. I'm going to talk about a couple of things here that I wanted to explain, because this series is going to be only talking about the 7 Hermetic principles as I study them and as I took out information, and related to the law of one, because you know that my philosophy is based upon the law of one and Buddhism. So you're going to see a lot of that, of course, in my explanation, because that's where my train of thought is guided to or directed towards. And yeah, I hope this makes a little bit of sense in that way. So after I may, because the book is so short, I may make or expand this series. If people are interested, actually, I will expand this into reading the KYBALION, only key parts that I think are important to analyze and to expand, because there are a couple of golden nuggets that we don't get, as far as I know, anywhere else, and I think they're really, really good. So I might expand on that on each of the chapters, just get a couple of things, talk about it, and make videos talking about this stuff. So if you're really interested in this stuff, let me know, because I'll dive deep into the material itself. But again, this is going to be an introduction, and then after this we're going to go into the 7 Hermetic principles. I'll make a video for each one of them. So the KYBALION. What is the KYBALION? The KYBALION is a book that was published by so-called 3 initiates, which are supposed to be William Atkinson is who they attributed to, a guy who wrote over 100 books. At the end of his life, he was an occultist, he was an attorney too, and it was all about Western occultism. And that's a word we need to kind of clarify here. Actually, that's a pretty good way to start about polarity, right? Occultism, clarity. So let's shine some light on the occult or dark side of this. The word occultism is basically derived only for Western culture, because we have been in dark times in terms of spirituality for reasons that we all know that have to do with the institution of religion. And so anything that defied the establishment on spirituality, which was guided by the corporate religion that we had and still have to a degree, was occultist, and that was because it was occulted. In fact, not to make this introduction longer, but the text recovered in Nag Hammadi in Egypt in 1945, which are the Gospels that were excluded from the Bible, created by, of course, the institution of Catholic Orthodox. They were occulted. They were actually physically hidden. They were occulted in this jars, in this place where they found them. And that's because they were being burned and the people associated with them were being killed and so on. So that's where we get, the word occultism and things. Even the book itself, the KYBALION, says, that this information has been kept secret. And secret from who? From the people who have been just following or prosecuting people who were into this stuff, just for being into this stuff. So that's actually history that I don't need to go into. It's always interesting, but it's not relevant. The reason I'm saying this is because the KYBALION is still a work that is considered that, occultism, and it's because its author, possibly being William Atkinson, he just didn't publish it on his name. In any case, that's just what we got, and it goes into something that's important. But first, I want to read something that you probably read already, but I want to tie it into something else. I think this is important. I believe this quote, I got it from the chapter of Cause and Effect, where they talk about everything that has a cause has an effect, and we'll get into that. I'm going to try to simplify it. Once I'm done with this, I'm going to leave you with a teaser that I will use as a frame of reference, a visual, if you can just imagine it, so you can understand the whole KYBALION and actually the whole creation in just one reference that I'm going to make at the end of this. But I got this, and it says, quote, "The infinite number of laws are but manifestations of the one great law, the law which is the all," end quote. And this is actually extracted from what the book says is the KYBALION, which is the teachings that were reproduced or handed down from master to student over thousands of years. I don't know what the source of the KYBALION is, but what I'm saying here is that the author or the authors who wrote it, they said that at the beginning of the book, they say that the format's going to be just like any regular book, and the quotes are going to be from the KYBALION, from the real teachings. So this actually comes like this. This quote supposedly comes from the original teachings. And so why I'm saying this is because me, I, as Ra, I like to have things, very structured. And one of the things that we can get out of this is that Ra says, when they are asked about different laws, they've said it explicitly that the law is one, that any other so-called law, they would call it distortions of the one law, which is the law of one. And they're also not only distortions, but manifestations, like they say here. They are manifestations of the great law. That law, which in essence is the same way of saying the law of one, that which is the all, law of one. The all is one. And they even say here, one great law. There's only one law. So as I started reading, and people say, we have all these laws. And as I read the KYBALION, I was so happy to find this quote here, because it does reflect that. There is only one law, and that law is that all is one, and the one is in all. And they even say it here too, but I didn't write it here. That is in the possibly between the first principle and what is called mentalism, or the all in the universe and so on. But that's something that I'm going to wrap up in the first principle when we talk about that. So that also explains the divine paradox, but we'll get to that. The other thing is that this, like I said, comes from ancient Egypt, from Hermes Trismegistus, which is also equated to Thoth, who has the emerald tablets, and the emerald tablets are supposed to be a deeper, dive into these principles and this way of seeing the universe and so on. So it's really cool stuff. I mean, Hermes Trismegistus was considered even a god in ancient Egypt, the master of masters, the master of wisdom. So we have pretty good information from then and from Thoth too. And this is where it kind of makes sense. I mean, we're talking about something that's very, very high and sophisticated information for the time. But of course, we know that back in those elder days, we had a lot more information in terms of spirituality and the nature of reality, not so much physical science or quantum science and Newtonian science. We were more into the real science, which is the one that encompasses all. So ancient Egypt is where this originated, and it also influenced a lot of the new or to come, the new coming spirituality, or not so much spirituality, but the thought, the schools of thought that came out of these teachings. Because from Egypt is where we got basically all our information, our education from higher densities. And they talk about higher densities here, not in the same words that we know it, but they talk about angelic beings or higher dimensional beings, which funny enough, they mentioned that they were here too. I mean, it's so much crossover with the law of one and the raw material. So the real important part that I wanted to make emphasis here was that this is why we see in belief systems or systems of school like the Essenes, the Gnostics, Hinduism, of course, Buddhism being the evolution of Hinduism, or like Alan Watts likes to put it, it's Hinduism for export. Buddhism is. Of course, it influenced Persian thought, Greek thought, and many others that obviously expanded out from Egypt. So we're talking about the essence of this. This is the law of one given back then and expanded out. And of course, like I said at the beginning of the video, a lot of occultism is just that. It's information that was occulted from the general public because there was an agenda, of course, for religious purposes. And yes, of course, the so-called esoteric knowledge is also equated to negative magic or black magic and stuff like that, because like Ra says, the law of one doesn't blink for the negative or the positive, it just, meaning that it just gives to any, because the law of one is the creation. The law of one just states that everything is one. So it will feed that person who calls. So if you call for negative information, you get negative information. If you call for positive information, you get positive information, and so on. So it goes a lot with the Hermetic principles here too, talking about the correspondence, the law of correspondence, which is as within, so without, and that's how we're gonna approach that in the coming videos. So the next is that when the student is ready, they do express this, and this is not just like some inspirational quote that they put in there. There's actually truth to this, because I just quoted the law of correspondence, as within, so without. So that means that if you're watching this video, then you're ready for this information, and possibly, of course, if you have read the KYBALION and so on, then you have been ready for this information. But in any case, there's just, as you don't encounter anything by coincidence. Of course, you're not watching this video by coincidence. A lot of this stuff has been, and this is not, some woo-woo stuff that's going on. This is actually true. I mean, there are many causes that eventually trigger this effect of you watching this video by all the things that you have been interested on, and is just like any other possibility that can be calculated. Of course, with our current methods of calculating things, probabilities, we're sort of limited. But that doesn't mean that the possibilities or the arrangement of the causes are not there. It's just that it's almost impossible for us, for our human mind, to calculate it. But all of that existed already. So you have to have a kind of be on track for what you want to manifest in your life. And this is, I mean, I'm not saying that this is what you manifested in your life, you know, forever. It's just one of the things that you're manifesting in your life. And this is one of the things that once you get into the knowledge of this, you start understanding your life a lot more, and it makes it a lot easier. So this just means that when the student is ready, then the material will come, or the information will come. They do state it in the book as saying, you know, there's no coincidence that you're reading this. There's a reason why you got into this book. So the other things I wanted to finish talking about is the introduction of the book, that they go into what's called mental transmutation, mental universe, and the divine paradox. Like I said, I may expand on this, you know, reading specific parts of the book to extract more information, and just, as you know me, I like talking about it, so I would talk about it. But for now, I just want to say that mental transmutation is the capacity or the ability that we have and can develop further to change things just by mind. Because as it's stated in the KYBALION and any other teachings, everything is mind. The whole universe is just one mind. The whole universe, in fact, is just one thought. The whole universe is guided by mind. And what we see out there is a manifestation of our minds. What we see in other people, what we see in the environment, the colors, what we feel with our senses, or anything, simply what you think is actually a reproduction of your own mind. So everything is mind. And so mental transmutation is that if everything is mind and you are in control of your mind, or you are aware of your mind — I don't like to use the word control because that seems like, you know, it's getting into the negative side of wanting to control things. But if you are aware of your mind, then you are aware of your thoughts, and you know that you are generating your thoughts. So by a sheer and simple act of directing your will, you can change your thoughts. And if you can change your thoughts, you can change the way you see reality. And that is mental transmutation of the mental and spiritual as well, because everything starts with the mind and ends in the mind. Now, this of course makes a good segue to mental universe, because mental universe just means that the whole universe is it's a mind, like I said. And some of you, I hope the majority of you who are watching this, I expect that the majority of you are familiar with the law of one and my explanation of the raw material. That means simply that we understand this, that we know what a mental universe is. But whoever doesn't, then that's a good introduction. Like I said before, everything is mind, everything is a thought, everything is energy that's just being simply decoded by ourselves. And we are not the mind, but the mind is the expression that we are here. And I think that's as deep as I want to get into consciousness. So the divine paradox actually derives from this idea too, that the whole universe is mind. So that means, and every other belief system to understand the universe has arrived to this. The Hindus or Buddhism, the Buddhists call it Maya, the illusion, that what we see is actually an illusion. What we perceive, rather, is an illusion, because it's reality decoded by the mind, and the mind is limited, and what we see is infinity. And so everything that we perceive by our senses and our thoughts and our mind is limited, and so that is an illusion. That doesn't mean the reality doesn't exist. Reality does exist, is real. We are sensing it, touching it. We are interacting with it. There is a transaction between the apparent me and the boards, and the apparent voice that I have in the microphone and everything else. So we are interacting with it. But that doesn't mean that it's real. So that is the divine paradox, that we know by analysis of the mind, by science of the mind, that we know that everything is an illusion. I mean, we have called this in philosophy many different names to the most strange ways, and we can call it that in the most nihilistic way. We can say that everything is really, in your mind, And I forgot there's a name for this philosophy that came out in the early centuries of the first millennia after Jesus. I forgot, but there have been so many ways of trying to deal with this idea that everything is mind, that everything is projected in the mind. But all of these fail because there's no distinction between consciousness and the mind. And that is the problem that a lot of Western philosophers have got into, that they don't seem to acknowledge the infinity of consciousness that we all are. And this is why Buddhism is so important for me and my philosophy, to understand that we are all consciousness, that beyond the mind there is consciousness, and consciousness is everything. So I think this is a good introduction for what the KYBALION is, and after this we're going to get into the 7 principles. If I memorize them well, is mentalism, that everything is mind. We're going to get into that, and there's much to talk about there. There is the law of correspondence, that would be the second one. Then I think it's vibration, polarity, cause and effect, there is rhythm, and then there's gender. Yes, I memorized them well. So I'm still reading them, I'm still enjoying them, but I wanted to give just like the gist of what they mean. And the teaser that I was going to leave you with as we talk about this stuff, and I'm done with this, is that which is going to help us just conceptualize everything. And I think is the easiest way for us to see the creation and everything else that we study and we learn as we go through our path of remembering who we are. This is a wave, or my best attempt to make a wave. Let me finish that line there. Terrible, but still, it works. This is going to explain the KYBALION. This is going to explain everything, especially the 7 Hermetic principles, because we're having what is a wave, what is a crest and a trough. So this will be represented in every single one of the Hermetic principles, more specifically the last 6. The first one is going to deal with infinity, which I would call infinity. The all is in all, and is going to maybe create the effect of this, but you can see already how vibration fits there, rhythm falls there, gender falls there, correspondence even, of course polarity, everything just falls in there. So with this, I leave you with the teaser, and the first video that I'm going to make after this one is going to be the first Hermetic principle, which is mentalism. I'll see you there.